Episode 10 of Season 4 of Fargo was titled Happy. Lloyd forms an uneasy alliance. Otis finds peace. Josto settles the score. Ethelrida takes a risk. And Oraetta gets spooked. Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. I am back again with my weekly recap, breakdown, and review of the latest episode of Fargo Season 4, Episode 10, titled Happy. A very, very interesting episode that sets up what I hope to be a great finale. We're going to break it all down in the spoiler discussion. Before we dive into the details, as you can see on the screen now, make sure you're following me on all my other social media accounts. That way you all can stay up to date of what's going on over here at Movie Files. If you are new to the channel, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing. And while you're at it, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my other Fargo reviews, other TV coverage, movie reviews, live streams, and all the fun things we do on this very channel. It would mean a lot to me if you all can share this video and give it a thumbs up. It helps out the channel, but I also really appreciate it. And in the comments, let's discuss this episode, Happy. What did you think about the portrayal of Lloyd, but also this new alliance that he has with Ethelrida? And also, let's talk about Oraetta and what we expect for her in the finale. Satchel, the big reveal with the ring. Let's discuss everything in the comments below. Your pros, your cons, and again, are you excited for next week's finale? Let's break it all down. So just overall thoughts before I get into the breakdown. I mentioned last week, I think episode 9 is by far the best episode of the season thus far. We still have one episode left, so, that might change. But I would say as far as this picking up after episode 9, of course, this is more tied into episode 8 because we know what happened with everything going down and the gun to shoot out at the train station, all that stuff. But I think this was a really, really interesting episode to set up the finale. I thought there were some, kind of good character moments for characters I really didn't care for, such as Otis and Gaetano, which we'll talk about. But I thought this episode, again, I love that Ethelrida, I mentioned it 9 episodes ago, she was one of my favorite characters. Her and Orietta's storyline kind of comes to a head, so I loved the she was so like a focal point in this episode, and I love the conversation at the end with Lloyd. And then we learned about Theodore Roach, so there was a lot of good stuff that I liked about this episode, and I really hope that this sets up a finale that we just can remember, because I know we talk about it every single week. This season's a mixed bag for a lot of people. I've been enjoying it, but I can see some of the flaws, but I hope that they stick the landing come next week. So again, let me know what you all thought about this episode and what you hope to see in the finale next week. So overall, good episode. So let's get into the recap. As it opens up, we finally get something we've been waiting weeks for, which is we finally see the war take place. We see Josto and Gaetano getting back for everyone that was killed in episode 8. Obviously, we saw that their mother died. We get this kind of stylistic montage, very stylized in the sense of the carnage that takes place. Lloyd losing, which I believe was over 27 men, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And we see the Smutney's family's basement is just filled with dead bodies. And we'll talk about the Smutney and the invoice that Ethelrida has. But I thought that it was a pretty interesting way to kind of kick off the episode, because we finally, number one, get to see the war and obviously the carnage that takes place. But then also we get that nice little tie-in of, again, the Smutneys doing what they do, this mortuary, and we'll talk about that. And again, the leverage that Ethelrida had. But I thought it was a really kind of interesting way to open up the episode. As we kind of move forward, we get this brief shot of Oraetta and Ethelrida looking at each other, kind of setting the stage for them kind of clashing heads, and we'll obviously get to that point. But we also see in this opening montage, Otis, I guess he's deciding to be a good cop now after the conversation he had with Deffy and before killing him in episode 8. So we see that, Otis goes to the Fada's order of operations, and he takes in Josto and Gaetano. We know that they're not going to be in jail for much long, because we obviously see them out of jail pretty quickly in this episode. But again, this kind of sets the stage that Otis wants to, as the synopsis alludes to, he kind of makes peace. Again, he's trying to be what Duffy told him. You can either die, I can't remember the exact quote, but it was just like, die a good man, right? Even though he killed Duffy, but dying in with your honor. And we'll talk about, obviously, the death of Otis a little bit later. So transitioning, we meet a new character. So it seems like the consequences for what Lloyd did to Leon is finally coming to head as we meet his cousin, Happy. Very interesting character, to say the least. I love his presence of when he's meeting someone. He has his lynchmen, his henchmen behind him with 2 pictures of, I assume, people of the elders or his grandfathers or people that kind of set the stage of his family. But I kind of like that character. It was kind of interesting to we're meeting a new character with literally one episode left. I don't know how I feel about that, but nonetheless, as we kind of break down this scene, a very interesting conversation between the two, because we see, things being talked about underdogs, about how Lloyd's losing the war, but he feels like, you don't lose until you win, which I like that kind of quote there. We get conversations about respect, the fathers, the grandfathers, the sharecroppers, and how they think that Lloyd is losing, and how, Happy doesn't think that Lloyd is a part of the family at all. So I don't know how I feel about this Happy character being introduced, and we'll talk about him a little bit later, but I do like that conversation that was had between two characters. But also Mrs. Cannon, again, we've gotten a little bit of tidbits of her throughout the season, but she has some really good moments, and this is one of them, as she just kind of talks about, we need this backup. She's speaking up for her family. She's saying that, okay, if they take us out, who do you think they're going to come after next? Which is obviously Happy. So after he kind of hears that, he kind of gets a little moment where he's like, you know what, we'll give you backup. Again, we're thinking that he's going to come together with the Cannon family, but we'll talk about his betrayal a little bit later. But, he agrees to help him out for 2 weeks and all this stuff. But, he says, well, how are you going to pay for what you did to my cousin? And, it's assuming that he's going to give him more powerful position, but we know that Happy has other plans. He wants another better deal, as we see later in this episode. So as we move forward, we see that Otis is becoming the flavor of the month, as his captain says. We see the department is giving him an applause after arresting Gaetano and Josto. He gets a warning from his captain after his captain says, you never bite the hand that feeds you. We see that he gets a call from Josto, and Josto kind of tells him he has a bullet with his name on it. And we think that maybe Josto is being intimidating, which we know he's really not that intimidating. And I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe, we're going to see Otis flip-flop yet again. But no, Otis is, again, he's making peace with his decisions that he's made as he hangs up on Josto. And obviously that pisses him off. As we kind of move forward, we see that Abel is talking about the people in New York. They want this war to be wrapped up. It's getting too messy. It's messing with business. And this is where we see Josto and Gaetano. Again, I mentioned a couple weeks ago, seeing Gaetano in this position, not trying to be the man, but being the person behind the man. I kind of like that dynamic much more than I did in the first half of the season, because as you all know in my previous reviews, Gaetano is not my favorite character. He's easily my least favorite character of this show, but there's been some redeeming factors in the character, so he kind of comes up with the idea that we need to replace Lloyd. We need to find someone else to kind of replace him, which we'll talk about that a little bit later. But again, you see the brothers kind of coming together in the last few weeks, and it is, like I said, I think I like this Gaetano much more than I like the Gaetano that we got in the first half of the season. So moving forward in the episode, we get a very brief scene catching up with Satchel as we see he's on the road with his dog Rabbit, which again, that episode last week was fantastic. But we see that, we'll talk about him a little bit later, but I just want to know, what do you guys think will happen to Satchel? And we'll obviously get to that part a little bit later in the review, but I like kind of how they're, again, planting the seeds as this Lone Ranger, this person that's out by himself. He's been given away by his father. This person that took care of him is now dead. Again, shaping him to Mike Milligan, that we'll talk about a little bit later. But either way, we kind of move forward. We see that Ethelrida is doing some research about Orietta's past patients, and we'll talk about that research that she did a little bit later. But as we kind of move forward, we get a really big moment. We finally find out who that ghost is that we've been seeing all season long. So we see Mrs. Smutney tells Ethelrida about their family. We learned that her great-great-grandmother was a slave, and on this slave ship, their captain was Theodore Roach, which she referred to him as the devil himself. We learn about this tragic story that he did, how he just treated people disgustingly, and again, he was the devil. And we find out that Ethelrida's great-great-grandfather got his hands on Roach and killed him and choked the life out of him. And with that death, that spirit, that ghost has haunted the Smutney family as long as she can remember in regards to their family tree. And we find out that Zelmar was trying to cast away the spirit, but he doesn't like Zelmar because she probably has a dark spirit, and he attaches himself to the sunlight. As we know, Ethelrida is very intelligent. She seems to be, she doesn't get her hands dirty like some of the other people in her family. Again, her mom and dad, sleeping with the devil themselves in a way of Lloyd, of kind of giving their business, messing with dirty money. We know Zelmar has killed people, an outlaw. So Ethelrida seems to be the only clear person, the kind of clean person, the sunshine per se in this family. We know that it seems like Roach wants to attach himself to her. And we'll talk about Roach a little bit later, but it was really kind of nice to see that kind of backstory of learning out who this ghost was that we've been seeing the last, 4 or 5 times throughout this season. So within this scene, we find out that Lemuel will be staying a few nights at the Smutney's house. We see him having a conversation to Ethelrida, where she brings up that she would like to meet his dad and talk to him about the house. The conversation's cut short because Oraetta makes her way to the porch. They have this kind of back and forth again. This was the stuff I've been wanting all season because these are two of my favorite characters, Ethelrida and Oraetta. They have a nice little battle of the words in regards to, we see Oraetta saying, well, I'm going to call the police. And then Ethelrida's like, well, call the police because I got a lot of dirt on you. So I love their kind of back and forth. But then within this conversation here, we see one of my favorite lines throughout this episode in particular, where they're talking about there's a special place in hell for people that give you charity. And Ethelrida is like, is that above or below the place that you're going? Again, I love them two on screen together. Their chemistry is fantastic. And they're just two really interesting characters. But then the last line that Oraetta gives her in regards to what's it like to feel like you're right, but nobody cares, and I'll see you in your dreams. Oh, that was just such a great line. And of course, we know that Jessie Buckley is just such a fantastic actress. I love the way she delivered that line. It was very menacing, very kind of just evil of her. And I was hoping, and we'll talk about the Roach scene a little bit later, but I was hoping that it was going to be revealed that she was maybe a distant relative of Roach, and that's why, maybe his spirit is inside her. And we'll talk about that later, but I love that line about haunting her dreams. Very, very good stuff there. Cut to Josto meeting Lemuel and Happy, which we know now that Happy is looking for a better deal. So he's sleeping with the devil himself, making a deal with the Fada family, which we'll see where that plays into the finale. But as we kind of cut to the next moment, we see that this conversation is cut short because Josto's future father-in-law wants to break this deal up. And we see the conversation kind of takes place. He says that I don't want you to marry my daughter because all this stuff you got going on with the war isn't good for business, isn't good for me. So he detaches himself. But in kind of assaulting or making bad comments to Josto, we see that, again, the brothers come together as Gaetano punches the alderman in his face. And we'll see if he'll come back up into the rest of this season, or I should say next week's finale. But again, the brotherly love, him sticking up for his younger brother, again, them embracing each other. Whenever you have people embrace each other, you know that one of them is going to go out pretty soon, and we'll talk about Gaetano's death here soon in a bit. But cut back to Satchel, we see him getting attention from two white men on the road in a red truck. As we all know, when you see red in a scene, that means that there's danger on the way, and there's definitely danger for those two guys, because we see Satchel pull out his gun, give a really good monologue in regards to, he tells them that the world is his, and he tells them to get away, to go away from him. And it's a really nice moment because, again, this kind of shapes the character that we think he's going to become. And I think we can pretty much confirm that he's going to be confirmed or go into becoming Mike Milligan that we know from season 2. So a really nice moment, again, him on this road, being alone, not being afraid to stick up for himself as Rabbi taught him. But I thought that was a kind of a nice little moment for that character. We go back to Otis, thinking of all the stuff that he's went through this season. Again, this is where he's coming at peace. All the stuff that he's did, the dirty deeds he's did, killing, Daffy a couple weeks ago, killing Swanee, going into the business with the Fada family, going into business with Lloyd. He's thinking of all the stuff that he's done up until this point. We see that Josto and Gaetano are at his place. They leave him a little gift in his house. And this is before we even go back to Otis and the gift that he finds in his house. We get a quieter moment again with the two brothers, and we learn a little bit about Gaetano's past. So we find out, I believe, at the age of 11 that he slept with some man who was important of the town, and we learn that he actually, Gaetano almost died, but he picks up a piece of glass, stabbed the guy in his eye, and we learn a little bit about his upbringing and how he was raised in regards to being a loner and how the war affected him, and how that war and how he was treated as a young kid has kind of shaped him as the person that he is today. Long story short, again, they have this nice little moment when they hug each other. Otis at this point is at his house. He sees that the house is destroyed, his collection of dolls and the stuff that he remembers his fiance about, even a picture of his fiance has been destroyed. So again, he's just at the point of his life where it's like, you know what, all this karma is catching up to me. We see him realizing that it's a setup. He runs out of the place, his apartment. He thinks he's going to get away in his car. He can't find his keys, drops his gun. We see him doing his little, his OCD thing, and he finally just stops. It feels like he finally can control something, right? So he kind of is just like content with what's going to happen. We see Gaetano walk up to the car. It was kind of a little bit of a hesitation from Gaetano. I don't know if he didn't want to kill him or he just had this kind of come to Jesus moment, but inevitably he does shoot him and kill him. And This is just, again, a character that I'm not a fan of at all. This was like the perfect way to see him go out. Number one, we know that his father, Gaetano, how he died, by a bullet going to his neck by a kid's gun, a little pellet gun. We know that Gaetano trips over the ice. He's a very clumsy, very silly, goofy character in whole. But as Josto tells him to hurry back up, he slips yet again, like he did on the ice, and shoots himself in the head. He kills himself, and that is the end of Gaetano. As the camera kind of pans to Josto, knowing that his brother just died, which, the brains coming out of his head was pretty sick. I love practical effects. He runs in the car, drives away, and we'll talk about that decision of him driving away and what that can mean for the finale. But as the camera pans, going back to Otis getting a sense of peace, we see that he's smiling. So, again, I mentioned a couple weeks ago, the only death that I felt like was justified and I had some type of connection to was Dr. Senator. Whether it comes to, Rabbi's death was okay. I really wish we got more from the character, but seeing Otis go out, seeing Gaetano go out, I still don't feel that emotional connection like, oh man, that was a great way for the character to die. But I will say Gaetano dying like that was something you would expect for that goofy ass character. But as we kind of move forward throughout this episode here, we go back to the Smutney's house. The camera moves around. We see Lemuel sleeping with the shotgun, and it seems like the camera's moving around like there's a ghost in the house. As we kind of go into Ethelrida's room, we see that Orietta's in there with a syringe. It appears she's going to kill her, but she starts to smell something, and she smells the presence of Theodore Roach. We see that he comes up behind her, frightens her, and I'm thinking to myself, why is he warning Ethelrida? Doesn't he want this family to be haunted? We'll talk about that at the end, but I thought that was really interesting. Nonetheless, we see that she is scared out of her mind. She screams, runs across the street to her house where the police are waiting for her. And this was a very funny moment as we see that, obviously Dr. Harvard has woken up. He's told the police the news. They're there to get her. She starts to scream, police, police. And one of the cops says, ma'am, we are the police. That is a very funny moment. And I am to assume that this isn't the last we're going to see of Oraetta. We know that she can talk her way out of a situation, so I hope that we get more of a better satisfaction or a satisfying conclusion than her just getting arrested and going away. As we see, she's getting taken to the police car. The Smutney family sees that she's going away, and Oraetta, or say Ethelrida, sees her and kind of puts a smile on her face. So I hope that's not the last of that conclusion, because if that's the conclusion of Oraetta, it's kind of underwhelming. So we'll see if she appears back in the finale, because like I said, she has a mouth on her. She can talk her way out of anything. So as we wrap up the episode, we see that Ethelrida finally gets her meeting with Loy, and we just see how smart and intelligent she is. And she talks about the painting being a knockoff. She talks about the research that she did earlier in the episode, where she tells Loy that he's lost over 27 men. He's like, yeah, that's about 20. Like, no, that's exactly how many men you lost. She talks about the interest on the mortgage that her family has, and just again, it just shows you why she's one of my favorite characters. It's just the intellect, the way she handles herself. She's such a fascinating character. As we kind of see her talking about the interest accumulated for the bodies that their family took care of, that the house is, that their debts essentially cleared off. But then she says, you know what? I want my family's house back, and I want the business back, and I have some leverage for you. So she pulls out the ring that we know is Gaetano's ring, and he's like, well, what am I going to do with this? As she pulls out a picture and tells him about the story of Oraetta and how she poisons people, how she kills people. And we see that he gets that. He sees the ring. He smiles. They smile at each other, and we get the end of the episode. So if I was a betting man in regards to how the episode ends and what it means for the finale, I am to assume that, again, her being so smart, Ethelrida, she's going to tell Loy that, hey, I know you have this beef with the Fada family. There was a guy that came out of her house, Josto. Maybe they conspired to have his dad killed for he can get the position of power. So I think that's kind of where that's leading to, as well as we know that Josto left his brother dead in the streets. So that's just going to be more fuel to the fire. Abel's going to tell that to New York. They're going to probably want Josto dead and killed. So that means that this war is probably officially dead, because we know that New York doesn't want this war to continue to go on. So now that Josto's off the map, Gaetano's off the map, they can now just maybe figure things out with the Cannon family to get back in order, or they'll just kill Loy themselves. But I think it's safe to say that that's kind of the angle that we can expect from the information that she gave him, that he's going to use that to say that Josto is a wild cannon, and you guys need to take him out because he killed his brother as well as his father. So I think that's where we're going into next week's finale, if I were a betting man. But I could be completely wrong. But let me know where you guys think that could go next week. What do we think will happen with Sasha? Will we get him back on the road? Will we catch up to him? Will he go to Kansas? Will he go somewhere else to become the character that we think he is going to become as far as Mike Milligan? What do we think of the Alderman? Is he going to make an appearance back in the finale with him being punched in the face? The brothers are now, Josto really needs someone now, so we'll see if he'll come back into the mix. We can't forget that Zelmar's out there. Will we get the conclusion of the ghost of Theodore Roach? And then, of course, what about Happy? How is Happy going to play into the finale? So let me know your thoughts on what we can expect next week. Let me know your pros, your cons, of course, your great theories that you all leave in the comments below. Let me know, again, can we expect a good finale? So with that being said, I really enjoyed this episode. I think it was a good setup for what I hope to be a really interesting ending to this season. So as always, make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss any of my other content. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you on the next video.